Hi everyone, welcome to the Great English Podcast. I'm Catherine.
And I'm Mark. What exciting things are we going to talk about today, Catherine?
Today's episode is going to be fascinating. We'll be discussing life without technology, the internet, and mobile phones. How different would our lives be? We'll explore this and learn some great English along the way.
That sounds like a really interesting topic. So, where do we start?
Let's begin by imagining a day without any technology. No smartphones, no internet, no computers. How do you think your day would look, Mark?
Well, without my smartphone, I wouldn't be able to check my emails or social media. I think I'd start my day with a book or a newspaper instead of scrolling through my phone.
Exactly. Many people might go back to more traditional forms of media. Reading books, newspapers, and magazines would likely become more common again.
And what about communication? Without mobile phones or the internet, we'd have to rely on landline phones, letters, or face-to-face conversations.
That's right. Communication would slow down significantly. Writing letters would be a common way to stay in touch with loved ones far away. It might even make our interactions more meaningful as we put more thought into our words.
That's a great point. So, let's talk about some vocabulary related to our topic today. What's the first word, Catherine?
The first word is disconnected. It means to be detached or not connected. In our context, it could mean being offline or not using technology.
Can you give us an example sentence?
Sure. She felt disconnected from the world when she went camping without her phone.
Great example. The next word is nostalgia. It means a sentimental longing for the past.
Here's an example. He felt a wave of nostalgia when he found his old typewriter.
Excellent. Let's move on to our grammar point for today. We'll discuss the past simple tense, which is used to talk about actions that happened in the past.
Perfect. The past simple tense is formed by adding ed to regular verbs, or using the second form of irregular verbs. For example, talk becomes talked, and go becomes went.
How about an example related to our topic?
Sure. Before the internet, people wrote letters to communicate.
Now let's practice some speaking. We'll do a role play where we imagine we're living in a time without technology. I'll start. Good morning, Catherine. How are you today?
Good morning, Mark. I'm doing well. I just finished reading the newspaper. Did you get my letter?
Yes, I did. It was nice to receive a handwritten note. It felt very personal.
I agree. There's something special about receiving a letter in the mail.
That was fun. Now, let's discuss how life would be different in various aspects without technology.
Sure. Let's start with education. Without the internet or computers, students would rely on textbooks, libraries, and face-to-face instruction.
That's true. Research would take much longer without search engines, but it might encourage deeper learning and critical thinking.
And what about entertainment? Without streaming services or video games, people might spend more time outdoors, playing sports, or engaging in hobbies like painting or knitting.
Absolutely. Families might gather around to play board games or read stories together in the evenings.
Now, let's think about work. Without emails or virtual meetings, work would be done primarily in person or via mail.
That could mean fewer distractions and a clearer separation between work and personal life. However, it would also mean slower communication and possibly less productivity.
Interesting points. Let's introduce another vocabulary word, manual. It means it is done by hand, not automatically or electronically.
For example, farmers did manual labor before the invention of modern machinery.
Great example. Another word is face-to-face. It means direct, in-person communication.
For example, without video calls, all meetings were held face-to-face.
Let's practice using these words in sentences. Mark, can you give us a sentence using manual?
Sure. The carpenter used manual tools to build the furniture.
Excellent. And for face-to-face, they preferred face-to-face discussions over phone calls.
Now, let's move on to some phrases and idioms related to our topic. The first one is to off the grid. It means living without modern technology or utilities.
Here's an example. They spent a month off the grid, camping in the mountains.
Another phrase is old school. It means something that is traditional or from an earlier time.
For example, she prefers writing letters because she's a bit old school.
These are great phrases to use in everyday conversation. Now, let's think about the pros and cons of life without technology.
One pro is that it could lead to more meaningful personal interactions and a slower, more thoughtful pace of life.
True, but a con would be the loss of instant communication and access to vast amounts of information.
Another pro is that people might become more self-reliant and develop practical skills, like gardening, cooking from scratch, or fixing things.
Yes, but on the downside, medical advancements and emergency services would be less efficient without technology.
It's clear that while there are benefits to a life without technology, there are also significant drawbacks.
Definitely. Let's introduce a few more vocabulary words and practice sentences with them. The first word is innovation. It means a new method, idea, product, etc.
For example, the smartphone was a groundbreaking innovation in communication technology.
Another word is convenience. It means the state of being able to proceed with something with little effort or difficulty.
An example sentence: online banking offers great convenience for managing your finances.
Excellent. Let's practice some conversation questions for our listeners. Imagine you're having a conversation with a friend about living without technology. Here are some questions to get you started.
How do you think your daily routine would change without technology?
What traditional activities would you like to try if you didn't have access to the internet or mobile phones? How would you stay in touch with friends and family without modern communication tools?
Those are great questions. Listeners, try to answer these questions and practice speaking with a partner, or write down your responses.
Now, let's dive a bit deeper into our topic and talk about specific scenarios. For example, how would emergency situations be handled without technology?
That's a critical issue. Without mobile phones, contacting emergency services would take longer. People would need to rely on landline phones or seek help in person.
Exactly. And without modern medical technology, diagnosing and treating illnesses would be much more challenging. Many medical procedures and tests rely on advanced technology.
Let's not forget transportation. Without GPS and navigation systems, we'd go back to using maps and asking for directions.
That's true. Traveling could become more adventurous, but also more time-consuming and potentially more stressful.
Speaking of stress, do you think living without technology might reduce stress for some people?
It's possible. Many people feel overwhelmed by constant notifications and the pressure to stay connected. Without technology, they might experience a simpler, less stressful life.
That's a good point. Let's introduce another idiom, back to basics. It means returning to the simple, fundamental aspects of something.
For example, living off the grid means going back to basics and relying on your own skills.
Great idiom. Now, let's do a quick vocabulary recap. We've learned disconnected, nostalgia, manual, face-to-face, innovation, convenience, off the grid, and old school.
And our idiom, back to basics. Let's use these words and idioms in a short dialogue to reinforce our learning.
Sounds good. I'll start. I recently spent a weekend off the grid and felt completely disconnected from my usual routine. It was a bit of a back-to-basics experience.
That sounds nostalgic. I remember when life was more manual and face-to-face interactions were the norm.
Yes, it was a nice break from the convenience of technology. I even wrote some letters, which felt very old school.
That's wonderful. Sometimes it's good to step away from all the innovations and enjoy simpler times.
Great job. Listeners, try to create your own dialogues using these words and phrases.
Now, let's have a brief grammar review. We talked about the past simple tense earlier. Let's practice forming simple sentences. I'll give a present tense sentence, and you can change it to past simple.
Perfect. Here's the first sentence. I write a letter.
I wrote a letter.
Next one, they read books.
They read books. The past tense of read is spelled the same, but pronounced read.
Great. Last one, she uses a typewriter.
She used a typewriter.
Excellent. Let's move on to another speaking practice. Imagine explaining to someone how to complete a task without using technology. For example, how do you navigate a city without a GPS? That's a great explanation. Let's try another one. Explain how to cook a meal without using any modern kitchen appliances.
Sure. Begin by gathering all your ingredients and tools. You'll need a stove, pots, and pans. Measure your ingredients using a scale or measuring cups. Cook over a flame, adjusting the heat manually. Use a timer or watch to keep track of cooking times.
Well done. Now, listeners, it's your turn. Think of a task you do regularly and explain how you would do it without technology.
Before we wrap up, let's talk about some possible long-term effects of living without technology. How do you think society would change?
One potential effect is that people might develop stronger local communities. Without global connectivity, local relationships and support systems would become more important.
That's true. Education and knowledge sharing might become more localized as well. People would rely more on community experts and local libraries.
Another effect could be a shift in how we spend our leisure time. Without digital entertainment, people might engage more in outdoor activities, arts, and crafts.
And we might see a resurgence of traditional skills and trades. People would need to know how to fix things, grow food, and make goods by hand.
It's fascinating to think about. Let's wrap up with one last idiom, unplug. It means to disconnect from technology and take a break from digital devices.
For example, I like to unplug on the weekends and spend time in nature.
That's a great idiom to end on. We hope you found today's episode interesting and thought-provoking.
If you did, please give us a like and subscribe to the Great English Podcast. And let us know in the comments what you would do on a technology-free weekend.
Thank you for listening. Remember to practice using the new vocabulary and phrases we've learned today.
Bye for now.
Bye everyone.